Episode 2: The Mountain of the Dead. The helicopter's rotors beat against the thin mountain air, like the wings of a giant metal insect. Below, the endless white expanse of the northern Urals stretched toward the horizon, broken only by dark patches of forest that looked like ink stains on pristine paper. Volkov pressed his face to the small window, his breath fogging the glass. Beside him, Colonel Ordakov sat rigid, his jaw clenched. The pilot, Senior Lieutenant Potapov, had been flying these mountains for 15 years. But his knuckles were white on the controls. There, Potapov's voice crackled through the headphones. Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of the dead. The peak rose before them like a sleeping giant, its slopes scarred by avalanche paths and wind-carved ridges. But it was the small orange speck near the tree line that made Volkov's stomach tighten, a splash of unnatural color against the monochrome wilderness. The tent, Ordakov confirmed. Exactly as we found it 3 days ago. We haven't touched anything. The helicopter circled lower, and details began to emerge that made no sense. The orange tent was partially collapsed, its fabric fluttering in the wind. But what sent ice through Volkov's veins were the dark lines leading away from it, tracks in the snow. Human footprints leading downhill toward the forest. "Set us down as close as you can," Volkov ordered. Potapov found a relatively flat area about 200 meters from the tent. As soon as the rotors stopped, the silence of the mountains pressed in around them, a silence so complete it seemed to have weight. Volkov stepped out first, his boots crunching through the snow crust. The cold hit him like a physical blow, even through his heavy coat and fur hat. The temperature was at least 30 below zero, and the wind carried ice crystals that stung exposed skin like needles. "Jesus Christ," whispered Ordakov, pointing at the tent. Up close, the scene was even more disturbing. The tent had been cut open, not torn by wind or damaged by animals, but deliberately slashed from the inside with a sharp blade. The cuts were clean, purposeful, made by someone desperate to get out fast. Why would they cut their way out? Volkov muttered, photographing the damage. The entrance is right there. But it was the tracks that truly defied explanation. 9 sets of footprints led away from the tent downhill toward the forest, some in socks, some barefoot, 1 or 2 in a single boot. In weather that would freeze exposed flesh in minutes. The hikers had fled their shelter wearing almost nothing. Volkov followed the tracks, his camera clicking steadily. The snow told a story, but it was a story that made no sense. The footprints showed no signs of panic or running. They were steady, deliberate, as if the group had walked calmly into their own deaths. "Investigator," Ordakov called from inside the tent. "You need to see this." Volkov crawled through the tent's entrance. Inside, chaos reigned. Sleeping bags, backpacks, and personal items were scattered everywhere, but not randomly, as if the occupants had been preparing for bed when something made them stop everything and flee. "Look at this," Ordakov pointed to a pair of boots, sitting neatly beside a sleeping bag. And here, a jacket hung on a line, as if its owner had been in the process of drying it. They left everything: food, equipment, warm clothing. Volkov examined a diary lying open near the tent's center. The last entry was dated January 31st, written in Igor Dyatlov's careful handwriting. "Heavy snowfall today. Made camp on the slope as planned. Yudin returned earlier due to illness, probably for the best. Temperature dropping fast. Strange lights in the sky tonight, but probably just the aurora. Weather should clear tomorrow. All in good spirits despite the cold. Nothing unusual, nothing that would explain why. Hours later, these same people would cut their way out of their shelter and walk to their deaths in the freezing night. The food's still here," Ordakov noted, examining a pot near the tent's entrance. "Looks like they were preparing dinner when whatever happened, happened." Volkov stepped back outside and began following the tracks toward the tree line. The snow was deeper here, sometimes reaching his knees. But the tracks remained clear, a trail of bare feet and inadequate footwear leading steadily downhill. About 50 meters from the tent, he found the first piece of clothing. A torn shirt, frozen solid in the snow. Then a sock. Then pieces of a sweater, scattered as if someone had been undressing while walking. "Colonel," he called. "Come look at this." Ortakov trudged through the snow to join him. Together, they stared at the trail of abandoned clothing. "Paradoxical undressing," Volkov said quietly. "What? I've seen it before. In cases of severe hypothermia. In the final stages, people become confused, feel hot instead of cold. They start removing their clothes." Volkov photographed each item, but that doesn't explain why they left the tent in the first place. The tracks continued toward the forest, but now they were joined by something else, marks in the snow that looked almost like drag marks, as if someone or something had been pulled along the ground. At the edge of the tree line, about 500 meters from the tent, they found the first body. Yuri Krivonishenko lay curled in the snow, near the remains of a small fire, wearing only underwear and a torn singlet. His hands were burned, the fingernails torn and bloody, as if he had been desperately trying to climb a tree. 20 meters away, they found Yuri Doroshenko in similar condition. Between them, the remnants of a fire made from broken cedar branches, clearly a desperate attempt to stay warm. But it was the cedar tree itself that made Volkov's blood run cold. The branches were broken off up to a height of 5 meters, torn away with such force that bark had been stripped from the trunk. And high in the tree, clinging to the branches, were scraps of human skin and clothing, as if someone had been frantically climbing, trying to escape something on the ground. What were they running from? Ortakov whispered. Volkov didn't answer. He was staring at the ground around the tree, where the snow had been disturbed in patterns that made no sense, circular impressions, too regular to be natural, too large to be human footprints. The radio on Ortakov's belt crackled to life. "Base to Colonel. We have a problem. Weather front moving in fast. You need to evacuate immediately." Volkov looked up at the sky. Dark clouds were rolling over the peaks like a black tide, and the wind was picking up, carrying the promise of a blizzard that could trap them on the mountain for days. "We need to find the others," he said. "Not today," Ortakov replied, his voice tight with authority and fear. "We come back with more men, better equipment. This place," he gestured at the broken tree, the impossible tracks, the frozen bodies. "This place doesn't want us here." As they trudged back toward the helicopter, Volkov couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Not by human eyes, something else. Something that belonged to these mountains and resented their intrusion. The last thing he photographed before leaving was a set of tracks he hadn't noticed before, large, round impressions in the snow, leading away from the cedar tree toward the deeper forest. They weren't human, weren't from any animal he knew, and they were accompanied by a smell that lingered even in the freezing air, ozone and copper. Like the aftermath of lightning strikes. As the helicopter lifted off, banking away from Kholat Syakhl, Volkov stared down at the orange tent growing smaller below. 7 more bodies were still out there, and whatever had driven 9 experienced hikers from their shelter into the killing cold was still waiting in the forest. The mountain of the dead had claimed its victims, but it hadn't finished telling its story. To be continued in episode 3, The Tent of Secrets. Authors note this story is based on the real Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959, in which 9 experienced hikers died under mysterious circumstances in the Ural Mountains. Despite multiple investigations, the exact cause of their deaths remains unexplained to this day.